would say that I hit rock bottom, where I didn't really feel like my life had a purpose. I didn't really feel like um, that there was anything beyond what I was experiencing in this life. And I remember I was entering university, and I was also in, first year philosophy classes. And I remember, being bombarded with these ideas that, that there is no God, and that we developed from apes through, through evolution. And I remember being bombarded with these ideas that even the universe was created on its own through many different theories, the multiverse theory or the cyclical universe theory. And I remember asking the questions or reading into it more. And I remember looking into things like the limitations of Darwin's theory, for example, and how Darwin was more interested in the diversity of species rather than in the actual origin of life in the universe, because that's what his research was limited to. So I remember thinking, so why do all these atheists think that this is something that is supposed to explain how everything in the universe came to be? Because that's not what Darwin's purpose was. He was just trying to explain why there's all these different types of finches and different types of cats, etc. So I found that very strange, and what I saw as an academic student is that there are limitations to his theory. Mainly, most importantly, he's not trying to explain the origins of life in the universe or how the universe came to be, because he's not a physicist. More, more, more than that, I studied things like physics. Physics was very enlightening to me because I saw, especially with the formulas, the mathematical formulas for, like, for example, the gravitational pull of a planet. There's constants that we use in these formulas, and there's formulas that are set that allows us to explain how celestial bodies, move in the universe space. For me, this was enlightening because it showed me that there is some kind of a design put in the universe that we can see through these formulas, and that these constants and these formulas had to have been there from the beginning, because if they were not there from the beginning, we will not see the universe in the form that it is. We will not see the universe with the designs of having this gravitational pull leading to this kind of orbit. We will not see these things. And for me, that was very, I would say, led me to this idea that there is intelligent design to the universe. And I remember in our church, we watched this lecture that was called Expelled, and it went all about how intelligent design in the academic world is shunned. Like, no one is allowed to study intelligent design at all, because it's called unacademic, it's called unintelligent, when the signs are leading you to see that there must have been some kind of intelligent design to put this information into the universe so that it is able to work in such a way where there's no chaos, where you are able to explain things in a very precise way. For me, that was kind of evidence that, the secular world, they are really trying not to see that. They're really trying not to see a design in the universe. I also studied things like DNA. DNA was very, 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 like, mind-blowing for me, because for me, I thought there's four, building blocks of life, CTGA. Different combinations of these CTGA, they create everything we see. Different combination of CTGA creates a tree. Different combination of CTGA creates a cat. Different combination of CTGA creates human being. Different combination of CTGA creates, the rocks, and everything we see. It's a combination of CTGA. So for me, I was like thinking in my head, this is an example of intelligent design. This has to be, because he's whoever is the designer, he's taking four things, switching them in their position in their sequence, and from that we get everything on Earth. I found that very, profound, in that the same materials creates everything. The first thing I thought about was how, you know, like, for example, my wife, she does soaps and candles and things, and body butters and these kinds of things. She makes them from scratch. I thought she uses very much the same materials in different things, but they lead to different products. So the same way, this designer, he uses the same materials, but it leads to different products on our earth and in the universe. For me, that was very amazing to think that, the same materials lead to different products. um, I also studied language and evolution, and I think this was very much the staple in my reasoning as to why there must be a designer. In that class, we went through the idea of whether or not language is uh, innate to human beings or not. Basically, that idea, is language innate to human beings or not, leads to the idea of whether or not we are descendant from apes or not. You see, because if language is innate to human beings, then have any we can't have any kind of situation where language is where the ability to speak and the ability to use language evolves over time, because innate means I have begun with it. It is in me from the start. So Noam Chomsky is the one that actually proposed this idea that language is innate to us, and the research suggested as so as well, because, for example, there was a lady, she was, interested in language studies with bonobos and primates and these types of monkeys. And what she tried to do is she tried to prove, basically, that we evolved from apes. So what she did is she took one ape, she taught it sign language. Okay, so this sign language capable ape, and then she taught another ape, taught it sign language, and together they mated. So these two apes that are able to use sign language mated and had an offspring. Now, when we do twin and adoption studies in school, we know that there are things like, for the twins um, who are who are in the same environment, they have the same genes, and the same shared environment, right? Same shared genes, same shared environment. Whereas the adoption studies, they show you that they have the same genes, but they don't have the same environment. So the idea is, how much of an effect does genes have versus how much does an effect of the environment have? So in this case, with the apes that are, they have the same environment, and they have the same genes in the offspring, right? So this offspring now has the shared environment of having a disposition to understanding sign language, and the genes from the parents who have a disposition to understanding sign language. So they did this again and again. Two good sign language ability apes, mating. What they did later on is they took an ape after the generations who has this propensity to understand sign language, and they put this ape in a human home. They put this ape in a human home, and they had the people in that home use language with these apes. So now you are having the genes and the shared environment of a language that is conducive to learning the language, right? So basically what they're trying to do is evolve this ape they're trying to evolve this ape through different pairings to eventually lead to this ape being able to use language. And they kept mating these apes that were in the human households. They kept mating them and having offspring, and trying to eventually lead to a better acquisition of knowledge, of language. So what did they find? they found results that contradicted their theory. What do I mean by that? None of the apes developed any changes in their larynx. The larynx is this part here that allows you to produce speech, to allow you to vocalize. After generations upon generations. Now, I'm not saying that evolution happens over, 100 years. What I'm saying is that you would expect to see some change. Some change. But there was no change. Not only this, but the animal, the in the sequence at the end, the ape that was at the end that was, had parents that were raised in a human home and was also raised in a human home, when they tested that ape with regard to his ability to use language, innovate it, use it differently, they tested no better than a 2-year-old kid. So for me, that was kind of like, this is evidence that language is innate to human beings. What more is, there were other people who did other studies with different animals. For example, there was a gray parrot. And the gray parrot, when they researched with this animal, it was better able to innovate using language. It was better able, for example, it could tell the difference between a small key and a big key, a black key and a green key. It was able to express that using language. So it was evidence to me that the idea that language evolved to the place where we have it now, where we're able to text and write essays and speak on levels that are so profound, and we're able to convey a message so abstract in thought. I don't think that was able from the way the way apes speak. So for me, that was profound in that it showed that language is innate to human beings. Now, why is that profound? In my understanding in Christianity, we were taught that when God created Adam, he also taught him the names of everything. Now, when you study neuroscience, you're told that the thing that separates human beings from the rest of the creation is that human beings have a large frontal lobe. This frontal lobe is what is the difference between us and the rest of the animal kingdom. Mainly, what is in our frontal lobe? In our frontal lobe are areas called Broca's area and Wernicke's area. These areas are concerned with speech recognition and speech production. So in my understanding, what I saw is that when Adam, peace be upon him, was made, God taught him the names of everything. In that, he created these Broca's and Wernicke's areas in his frontal lobe. And that's how we have the ability to recognize speech. That's how we have the ability to produce speech, because it is something that God himself has taught us. God himself has put in us. So that's when I came to the belief, after all that research and all those really looking into the limitations of the atheist perspective, that's when I really started to think that there is a designer and a creator to this universe. But I didn't really know who that creator was, because in Christianity, I was taught a creator that wasn't really a creator that I believed in, as I said earlier. There were other things too, like in Christianity, they tell you that God created the heavens and the earth in 6 days. And on the 7th day, he rested. I didn't understand why God needed to rest. If he's God, he should be all-powerful, almighty. He shouldn't need to rest. What's the reason for God needing to rest? I didn't understand how, if God wanted to forgive us, why couldn't God just forgive us? Why did he have to sacrifice his son? For me, as a logical person, alhamdulillah, I'm a father now. If I wanted, I would never sacrifice my daughter to save somebody else. I would save my daughter. My daughter I would want to keep safe, and instead I would send myself. So I was confused as to, if this Trinity is true, why didn't the Father send himself to save his son? That's what a father should be doing. He should send himself, sacrifice himself, instead of sacrificing his son. That didn't make sense to me. I didn't understand how, again, someone born of a human being led to them becoming God. I didn't understand that. And there are many things in Christianity that I didn't understand, like how, the way that they worship God, down to the very basics. How do they worship God? They sang, they danced, they played music. And I know that, you can sing, you can dance, you can play music for doing other than worshiping God. People go to concerts, people go to clubs, people go to, musical concerts, and they're not worshiping God when they're doing that. They're doing something completely different. So I thought to myself, if you had a recording of, let's say, for example, a Christian concert, okay, and you had a recording of a non-Christian concert, and you had them playing next to each other, and you just muted the two, would you be able to tell which was worshiping God and which was just, for an artist's own songs? I don't think so. I don't think so. And in that, I learned that there is no singling out of worshiping God in a specific way that is only for God. You're only doing this for God, and you're not going to do this for anything else. For me, that was evidence that clearly the way that Christianity has gone about worshiping God is not a way that is only for God. That someone can say, I only do this for God. No, because you dance, you sing, and you play music for other things too. So at that time, I was still in university, and I knew that there was a creator based on the evidence that I had come to through my research and education. But I also did not know who this creator was. So I started to look back into the religions of the world. I started with Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism, and with those, Hinduism, I saw a lot of, mentionings, especially in the upper scriptures like the Vedas and the Upanishads, that, same things we found in Christianity, God is one, don't worship idols, be kind unto your neighbor, all these things, they're in there. But then when you learn from the Hindu scholar about his book, has it been maintained from the 5,000 years up till now? They admit no, our book has not been maintained. So I felt like if I'm gonna follow a book, I should follow somebody's book who I can trust, because if it's from God, I believe if it's from God, one, it should not have any errors and contradictions. Two, it should be preserved. It shouldn't have any, differences along the way that led to changes in the message. Um, with Buddhism and Confucianism and Taoism and those things, they didn't really talk about God. They were more talking about energy and the way to maneuver this life without having too much of an impact on the environment around you. Now that's nice to say out loud, but when it comes to the actual, like, what can you do? Like, what can you do to actually fulfill this non impactful way of life, or like how do you maintain your joy or your happiness? There wasn't much there for me personally. I didn't see how meditation, it just wasn't for me. How you just think about nothing, empty yourself, I didn't understand that for me was, it felt like a waste of time. No disrespect to any Buddhist or anybody that follows that particular philosophy.